several different requests for how recovery shows up relationally at work, at home. How do we show up in relationship with people that aren't also in recovery, and how that feels really different. If you're new to recovery, that's okay. Welcome. If you're a long timer in recovery, glad you're still here. And what we know is we vacillate in and out of this. What makes us fellow travelers is that when we need this, we know where to come. So I want to start a series on boundaries, and I'm going to try to hit one of the topics or one of the subgroups, but I also want to do an introduction on what a boundary is. Because when I started therapy and my own recovery, boundaries is the hardest part for me. So in our series, we'll talk about boundaries between me and me. What we'll also talk about is boundaries between me and a partner, whether that's boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, spouse, and equal. Boundaries between me and family of origin, and boundaries between me and work or people outside of recovery. So tonight I wanted to introduce boundaries, and some of you guys have heard before, and what I can tell you about that is allow your body to absorb whatever it needs. Whatever we're in scarcity of is what you're going to pick up on. And if you want to take notes, you can. And if you can just let your body absorb, that's great too. So I'll speak on this recovery topic, and then I'll open it up to you guys for experience, strength, and hope. So when I was thinking about this topic last week, I took a lot of notes, and frequently in our industry, there are posts on Facebook pages that says something like, if you could talk for an hour on any topic without preparing, what would it be? And I say, codependency, numbing, medicating, and boundaries. So when you think of boundaries, I want you to think about, what were you exposed to? What was modeled for you? What did you witness? In witnessing, I want to be inclusive of, for anybody that's just joined, I just want to mention about the recording. You guys aren't being recorded. It's just me. So when we start our series with boundaries, I want to make sure there's an understanding of what it is. And as you think about your template, or as I think of myself sometimes, when I think of my coding, like on a computer, what I was originally given in my family of origin, what was modeled for you when it comes to boundaries? And when you think of that, I want you to think about, what did you see? And maybe now as an adult, as a fellow traveler, what did you not see? So it's also the absence of, not just what was modeled. So just think about that for a second. What did you see? What did you notice? What I noticed was a lot of all or nothing. I share frequently that I do come from an addictive home, and it's why I do the work that I do. And that created a lot of polarization for my family. My dad also, obviously an ACAer, and my mom. My dad went in and out of different addictions, from being a workaholic to being an alcoholic to using opiates to just kind of filtering back and forth, food. And the resources that exist now didn't exist then, unfortunately. And what we know about recovery, especially when it comes to substances, and process addictions, when it comes to that, is abstinence absolutely is a possibility for some, and for others it's not. So for example, the alcohol, could my dad stop drinking? Yeah, he totally could have. Was he in recovery? No, he was dry, because as soon as he stopped drinking, he would eat more and work more. Okay. So the alcohol went away. So all or nothing. And then he went straight into working a lot and eating a lot. So when you think of what was modeled for you and you think of boundaries, was there an area where you ever saw balance? I also know of families, family friends, clients that I've worked with where even the healthy things wasn't healthy, where it was excessive exercise or excessive dieting. My mom, when she would be on a diet, would eat 2 pieces of fruit a day. That was her diet. Don't get me started on the diet industry. So when we think about boundaries, the patterns that are created in our family of origin that are modeled for us situationally, environmentally, family culture wise, noticing what information we gather from that. If I start this, I stop that. I wonder if that's healthy. I think it depends on what we're talking about. And I want to give you some analogies or metaphors so that you can create some visualizations for boundaries. Because for some people, I think the term boundary can be, there's different definitions. So, for example, a dam in the river stops the water from flowing. It's a wall. It's not permeable. It stops. Versus maybe, I'm such a nerd. This is the only example I can ever come up with. Cell membrane. The purpose of a cell membrane is that it lets the good shit in and it stops the stuff that doesn't belong in there, or it pushes out anything that it doesn't need. So it is permeable. There is movement in and out. So notice the difference between a dam in a river that stops water or the dam that opens up and water comes gushing through versus a cell membrane. When you think of boundary, I want you to think of the cell membrane because the dam is the all or nothing. When we're talking about boundaries, the intention and the purpose of a boundary is to land somewhere between the all or nothing. All or nothing rarely is healthy. It's not balanced by any means, and it's exhausting if you notice that's how you show up. I'm really transparent, I'm always honest, or I'm hiding Amazon boxes from my husband. Or I put it on my credit card instead of the debit card so he doesn't know. Where does that fall? All or nothing. Secrets or honesty? Overboard honesty, right? So as we're learning how we show up and how to be relational, not just relational with my partner, with my family of origin, with my friends, with work friends, but also relational with me and me. Because sometimes if we are raised in a home that's really boundaryless, like a polarized home, I fluctuate between that rigidity and that overly transparent. And when I stay in those two places, what I notice in my world that creates the most dysfunction is my relationships. But what we notice first as humans are the relationships outside of me. We're either doing really, really good, sex is great, we're great, or we're about to get divorced. It's this massive pendulum swing that doesn't allow for connection, much less intimacy. And I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about connection on a deeper level. Connection where I know who I am. I know what my boundaries are. I know how I want to show up, and I'm able to do that. I color myself in. And for some of us, that might be new. because I didn't get to color myself in until I was in recovery. Childhood was very black and white. Color didn't come until recovery. And so looking at how I want to show up relationally absolutely starts with the boundaries of me and me. It's, I don't know, do I still see her? Do I still hang out with him? I don't know. How do I feel about that? And so often you guys have heard me say, if you do a boundary right, it's going to be met with resistance. Because so often our boundary-less behaviors are way more beneficial than for other people than they are for us, right? And the reason we do that is because it's very all or nothing. If I don't do this for them, they might not love me. Do you hear the attachment styles we talked about a few weeks ago? Yeah, anxious attachment, avoidant. And so being able to look at boundaries and notice how that shows up for me. And so considering your relationship with the things that show up in your world, and I'm not even talking about people yet. How do you feel like you are, if we have our polarized opposites here, how do you feel like you are relationally with work? Are you all or nothing? Or have you found some gray area in the middle? For me, part of my recovery program is workaholic, and I escape at work. I'm good at it. And at home and in relationships, I feel very vulnerable and I feel very inferior at times because pathology makes me feel powerless. So I can go into all or nothing with work. And so I'm asking you to think about, how do you show up relationally with work? Do you use it as an escape? Do you make it a priority so that you can escape or avoid? Similarly, how do you show up relationally with food? Does it just serve a purpose and it gives you fuel for your body? Or are you also able to sensationally enjoy food? Or do you notice that when shit hits the fan, you just ate 3 pieces of the key lime pie? I mean, we're humans. There's no judgment here. We're just being curious about how we show up relationally and where our boundaries are with me and me. Because what I notice is when I'm not okay, I can really become boundary-less. And the ways and the things that I'm doing to take care of myself aren't really nurturing. They aren't really supportive. They usually end up looking like numbing or medicating. So my hope for the boundary series is for you guys to ask a lot of questions to yourself and be really curious about how you show up relationally with things in your world. Next week, we'll talk about partner or family of origin. But for right now, I'm really just curious about you and you. How do you show up for her or him? Do you overshare and then find yourself really vulnerable, and maybe that person is gaslighting at times and uses it against you? Where does that boundary belong? Who becomes safe and who's unsafe? And how do you start to decipher that? So again, when I started therapy, this was the hardest part of my recovery, was figuring out where to put the boundary. Because I really struggled with really creating distance when sometimes distance was due. And there is a person in my personal life, in my recovery, that I have created a massive boundary with that looks a little bit more like a dam. But that's because that person is very sick, was a very abusive to me, and unfortunately isn't in recovery. So in that situation, that is healthy for me. It is protective for me. It's not a love-hate. So I hope this brought up some things for you that might be helping you be more curious, please, please remember, this is not about blame or fault. This is not judgment. This is curiosity about your facts. And just because that's what was modeled for you, or that was your coding, as I say, doesn't mean that you now can't change that. But unless I decide that it's a problem, I'm probably not going to change it. So bringing this from your subconscious into your conscious is how we start to recognize from a place of awareness, am I okay with that? And maybe you're not. And maybe you're ready to do something with that. So as you are curious about this, if you notice anything coming up, please make notes. Take it to your therapist in your session this week. And yeah, I'm going to open it up to you guys for experience, strength, and hope on this. Things I want to share is if you're new to these meetings, and even if you're not, and you're noticing that the silence is uncomfortable, I want to invite you to breathe, because that too is a boundary. Some of us need to fill the silence because it's scary. Others of us dissociate or start washing dishes because we don't want to notice the silence. And so the invitation to just notice what happens for you when there is a silent pause in this meeting. Usually it's because some of us are processing what was just shared, or somebody is putting some thoughts together to share. And I remember when I started my recovery, that was extremely uncomfortable for me. So I just wanted to share that. When you think of me and me, what brings most of us to therapy is an external relationship. Most of us say, my husband and I need to learn how to communicate better. Or I hate my job. I want to share a couple of themes with you that my hope is, it's one of those scarcity things I mentioned at the beginning, that if your body needs to absorb this, it will. So the silence allows us to be seen and heard. That might not have been part of your family of origin. And we attract our equal level of health. So many of us that are in recovery, sometimes, for me at least, I couldn't always put words on why people didn't feel safe to me. I just knew they didn't. And when I got further along in my recovery, I could start to recognize that it was because they lacked that level of recovery, because there was some codependency traits or some intrusiveness that I felt sometimes energetically. But what I was able to reframe that as was, I have now become intolerable to unsafe relationships. And boy, did that feel good. Because all I had was unsafe relationships for most of my life. And that word intolerable was how I recognized I have to feel to heal. If I'm not in my body and I'm still numbing and medicating, I won't be able to set those boundaries, because I can't tell if this feels safe or not. I can't tell if I like it or I don't like it. I was one of those clients walking into a therapist that said, I don't know what I like. I don't know what I don't like. Like, tell me who I am, basically. Because I was such a people pleaser that I had no identity. And to feel, to heal, yeah, we do go through that emotional flood, and it hurts like fuck, and we don't like it. and I didn't like it. Let me speak in the I didn't like it. I wanted it to stop. And I wanted to numb and medicate, because all or nothing is the mentality of survival. It is a trauma response that allows us to stay in survival mode longer. And what eventually happens is our culture then eventually calls it addiction. Alcohol helped me stay in the relationship longer. Work helped me stay a dad longer, even though I didn't know what I was doing and I was overwhelmed or overstimulated, or whatever that is for you. But whether we're talking about someone who's dry, or we're talking about the exercise or the food or the video games or the sex or the porn, any substance or behavior can become a number and a medicator. And what it's doing, that isn't the, there may be an addiction to it by definition, and it's because there's a trauma that needs healing. There is a wound that causes me to numb and medicate because I don't know who I am. I don't know how to show up. And when I'm boundary-less, I'll be able to see that easier in all of my relationships. So the reason I started with me and me is because I'm the roadmap. The boundaries that I make with me and me, when I decide this person is safe, I would give her my debit card PIN number. This person, not so much, but she's fun to go to the movies with. Or this sister never tells mom anything. I can trust her. This sister tells everybody in the whole neighborhood. When I start to decipher how I feel in the relationships because I'm feeling to heal, this becomes the roadmap for this. So being able to look at how I'm showing up in my world navigates how I want to show up in every other relationship. And when it comes to boundaries, the tool that I want to offer is, if you work with me, you see this all the time. It's the scale of 1 to 10. It's my own personal recovery tool that I literally use daily. It started me, and almost 18 years in, I'm still using it. Because on a scale of 1 to 10, that is the all or nothing. And I don't want to be all or nothing, because if I am all or nothing, then I'm going to have to numb and medicate. So the goal of boundaries is to start to land on the 2 and the 8, the 4 and the 6. It's moving in the gray. And so when I'm looking at something and I'm starting to have awareness of how I feel, I'm going to give it a number. And I'm going to say, oh, I'm on the 10. Like, I can't get any more rigid with this. And what would it look like for me to be on the 8 or the 9? And what would that boundary look like? So using the number scale can be, it's so applicable in so many different areas. And for me, I use it with my emotions and what I need. Because emotional reactivity was a huge part of my childhood. Rage, anger, it was just crazy. So for me now, I need to recognize when I'm climbing up that scale and where I want to be in the gray area. Because my recovery tells me if I'm in the gray, sometimes that might be the 9, sometimes it might be the 2. The goal is 5, but if I'm in the gray, I'm doing my recovery. So I wanted to offer that to you guys tonight as your tool. Take that to your therapist. Find out how you can apply it for you. Find out how it shows up for you. But remember, I gotta feel to heal. And if I want healthier relationships on the outside, I gotta be healthier on the inside first. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I'll share a different one next week. And next week, I think we'll do Family of Origin. boundaries with family of origin. And